Welcome to this Ethical Point Explainer. Today, we are taking a 200-year-old military theory and using it to crack a modern GS4 exam question.
Wait, really? A 200-year-old theory? How is some classical warfare framework going to help us make sense of the totally chaotic geopolitical conflicts on our news feeds right now?
Look, I know it sounds like a massive stretch, but trust me, understanding this classical framework isn't just a history lesson. It is literally the absolute best lens you can use to answer complex questions about modern geopolitics. So, Karl von Clausewitz famously said, war is merely the continuation of policy by other means. And that exact statement, that is the foundation of a 150-word, 10-mark UPSC question that we are going to completely decode today. Okay, wow. So if I can actually master what this quote means in the 21st century, I'm not just going to answer the question, I'm going to totally crush it. Let's get right into it. Right. So here is our quick roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll demystify Clausewitz's core logic. Second, we'll map out the modern conflict spectrum. Third, we'll dive into ethical limits and non-state actors. And finally, we will bring it all together for mastering the GS4 exam. All right, moving right into Section 1, Demystifying Clausewitz's core logic. You know, it's really easy to just assume war is this totally irrational, isolated act. Like just a complete breakdown of communication that ends in mindless violence.
Yes, that is absolutely the most common misconception. But Clausewitz argues that war is not an irrational act at all. Instead, it's a highly calculated, deliberate instrument of state policy. States use it to achieve very specific political objectives when diplomacy fails or, just isn't enough. Basically, war and diplomacy aren't opposites. They actually exist on the exact same continuum of statecraft.
Which brings us to Section 2, the modern conflict spectrum. Okay, but how does this old theory actually apply today? I mean, doesn't the constant threat of global nuclear annihilation kind of completely change the math? Oh, it absolutely changes the math. Clausewitz's whole idea of other means has expanded into this massive multi-domain spectrum. It's no longer just, talking on one end and shooting on the other. We now have distinct steps. We start with diplomacy, then economic pressure, then cyber warfare, then limited military action, and finally full-scale war.
Right, because of nuclear weapons going all the way to step 5, all-out war, has just become a totally irrational policy choice for any state.
Exactly. Nuclear deterrence essentially acts as a ceiling. It keeps most modern geopolitical conflicts bouncing around between steps 1 and 4. So modern states use limited, highly specific military pressure to achieve their goals. For instance, we see strategic signaling in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where military positioning and action are used as coercive tools regarding regional security buffers and NATO expansion. Or look at coercive diplomacy in the Israel-Hamas conflict, where military pressure is heavily combined with mediated negotiations to strengthen a position at the bargaining table.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess we also see calibrated action, like the surgical strikes between India and Pakistan. Those actions are literally designed for precise political messaging without triggering some massive full-scale escalation.
Spot on. Those are all textbook examples of modern statecraft in action. What about non-military tactics, though? Because it really feels like great powers today can fight entire wars without firing a single bullet.
Well, you've just hit the nail on the head. You're describing hybrid warfare. This is the use of non-kinetic tools to achieve political goals. So we're talking about economic coercion through sanctions, the weaponization of global supply chains, and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. It's all designed to completely undermine an adversary without ever crossing that threshold into open war. The ongoing tech rivalry and trade tensions between the US and China, prime example of this modern substitute for traditional warfare.
And the next layer of this whole shebang is narrative warfare. Conflict today is fiercely fought right on our phones, on social media, and in international forums. The political objective here is winning hearts and minds while globally delegitimizing your opponents. Oh, I see. Okay, this is a massive keyword for a UPSC exam answer. It proves to the examiner that you understand the battlefield isn't just physical anymore, it's deeply psychological and informational. Exactly right. If you can clearly articulate narrative warfare in your response, you instantly elevate your entire answer. All right, Section 3, Ethical Limits and Non-State Actors. Wait a minute, though. All of this statecraft logic is great, but let's be real. Not all modern conflicts are started by rational, calculating governments. That is a completely fair point. What happens when an algorithm or a group of hacktivists starts a war? This is exactly where Clausewitz's state-centric rationalist model kind of hits a brick wall. His theory assumes that rational state actors are always at the steering wheel, but today, the variables are wildly unpredictable. We are looking at some really serious, modern limitations to war as a policy tool. First off, we face the very real threat of AI-driven algorithmic errors in cyber systems escalating a conflict completely by mistake. Second, there's the massive rise of non-state actors. Think extremist groups or independent hacktivists. Their objectives are often driven by radical ideology, not some coherent state policy.
Right, and beyond all that, there's economic global interdependence. Globalization just makes prolonged war incredibly costly for everyone's supply chains, which honestly makes economic sanctions way more effective than physical warfare. Plus, there's the heavy humanitarian and ethical scrutiny under international law. States just can't ethically use outright war as a primary, consequence-free tool anymore.
Exactly, which leads us perfectly into Section 4, Mastering the GS4 exam. Let's talk about how to directly apply all of this. Okay, so looking at this matrix, if I'm breaking this down for my answer, under actors, we've moved away from just rational states to a mix of states, non-state actors, and AI. Under means, we've shifted from purely conventional military force to a whole spectrum filled with hybrid and narrative tools. And finally, under goal, the ultimate aim has shifted from traditional territorial conquest to what we're calling sustainable security.
Perfect summary. If you structure your answer with that exact comparison, showing how the core logic of war persists, but the application has completely evolved, you are proving some serious deep analytical competence.
And the ultimate conclusion your model answer absolutely must draw is that concept of sustainable security. Look, in today's interconnected nuclear-armed world, outright war carries the risk of universal catastrophe. So territorial gains are taking a backseat to things like achieving economic dominance, maintaining technological superiority, and preserving favorable political narratives. This right here is the modern evolution of Clausewitz's policy objective. Okay, I'm taking notes. So to maximize my marks, I basically need to effortlessly drop this exact cheat sheet of keywords into my 150-word response. Continuum of statecraft, coercive diplomacy, hybrid warfare, narrative warfare, AI-driven warfare, and sustainable security. Using these specific terms is going to signal to the examiner that I truly understand the cutting-edge insights of 21st century geopolitical strategy. Exactly. So let's leave you with this. If traditional war is becoming obsolete due to nuclear deterrence and economic interdependence, how will your generation defend its sustainable security in the digital age? When the battlefield is literally everywhere, in our supply chains, our algorithms, our social media feeds, how do we ethically navigate statecraft? I want you to think really deeply about that as you write out your model answers. It definitely gives us a whole lot to think about. Thanks for breaking this all down. My pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and we'll see you next time.